Hello, class, and welcome back to this week on accountability and measuring it. And by measuring it, I mean I'm going to let you read or have you read part of the chapter on research design that's in your book. If you want to know more about measuring it, that particular part of this project that we're trying to undergo this week, then I suggest that you join me for this summer for my research design class. If you haven't already taken it, I am teaching the research design class this summer at CU Denver SPA. So that might be an interesting project to think about nonprofits in particular while we're doing the research design class. But today, I'm going to talk about three things. I'm going to talk about adaptive learning or single loop, double loop learning. I'm going to use that particular method to talk about it. Then I'll talk about the CRM homework assignment that you're going to be doing for this week. And last, I will show you some tips and tricks for getting your research done for your nonprofit manager profile. The research portion of that, I'm going to want a one-pager on the research that you've done and whatnot next week. I try to do all my writing assignments iteratively, and this is the iteration that you're going to get next week. All right, so let's start by talking about the single loop and double loop learning. This is adaptive learning is what Abraham calls it, or sometimes organizational learning is what it's been called. Chris Argyris, who is the one who designed this particular model, which Abraham refers to in his both his chapter and his article that you're reading for the week, he talks about single loop and double loop learning because he says that most of the time you and your organization start with an assumption. Then you make a plan based on that assumption, and then you execute that plan. And afterwards you do some accountability, right? You measure it and see if you've done what you expected to do, you verify it. And if you didn't quite meet your plan, you adjust, and then you make another plan and then execute that plan. This is called single loop learning, and it's very valuable for meeting a goal. However, sometimes your goals, your basic assumption, your goal that you set in the first place may be off completely. And so you sometimes have to go in and revise that basic goal, the basic assumption you're working on. He gives several examples. One example would be the assumption that you are to support your boss in an open meeting, right? That's what you assume. So you go into your meeting planning to support your boss in the opening in the meeting, and then you do it. During the meeting, you don't say anything negative about it, even though you have some issues. Or maybe you say one negative thing and you don't like it. So you adjust, and next time you don't say any negative things, right? Or maybe your boss sets up a plan that you should not speak out in open meetings, right? Or maybe he says you should speak out in open meetings, but you know that he actually means don't speak out in open meetings, right? But maybe this whole goal of not contradicting your boss in an open meeting is a problem. It's keeping your organization from learning. And maybe what you need to do is actually revise your assumption that it's improper to speak out against your boss in an open meeting. And that would require your boss also revising that assumption. In fact, you find that if you go back and revise those goals and really think hard about the goals, not just how you get to those goals, the methods, but the goals themselves, you can do a lot more learning and achieve a lot more. So having a lot of opportunities, giving yourself opportunities to think about your basic assumptions is very important for helping organizations to grow and adapt. Let me think of another example. You might have the example of having a goal, assuming that your ultimate goal is to create a less homelessness, right? So you assume that homelessness is caused by a very bunch of issues. And then you plan based on those issues. And you verify your plan, and then you verify the things that you plan for, right? So you assume that it's based on, let's say, addiction, um, let's say mental health, right? Other than addiction. And let's say poverty caused by certain factors. In particular, divorce causes a lot of poverty, which is why so many poor people are women and children. Also, health problems cause a lot of poverty, which is why so many people who are poor have serious health problems and mental health problems. So let's say that you got those, that those are your plan, is to deal with those. And then you say, okay, are we dealing with those things? I mean, you might even say, are we dealing with homelessness, right? Generally, you might say, well, there's fewer homeless people because we're dealing with these things. But what if something comes along like a natural disaster? You might still be dealing with these things, but the natural disaster may have caused a lot of your homelessness, and your assumptions about what causes homelessness might be completely wrong. So it might help as a homelessness organization to deal with things that cause natural disasters like global warming or global climate change, which has caused fires that have caused people to lose their homes, floods in Texas and Puerto Rico. Storms have probably been increased. The power of those storms are likely been increased by global warming and global climate change. So part of being in the homeless shelter might be dealing with the effects of global climate change, or at least dealing with, or maybe even global climate change itself. But you're still dealing with drugs, alcohol, illness, divorce, those problems. So you might not be achieving your ultimate goal of ending homelessness, even though you think you are, because you're in this cycle. But if most homelessness suddenly is caused by Tropical Storm Maria, then you have to deal with different problems. So you have to do this cycle. I hope that makes sense. If it doesn't, I can recommend some reading. I also hope Abraham will try and explain it to you twice in 2 of the readings for today. The second reading is rather long and longer than it has to be. Abraham's not a very good editor. So bear with it. Skip over portions that you think, yeah, I get this. But try to definitely read about adaptive learning in particular, and how evaluation can hurt this double loop learning and sticks just to single loop learning. Evaluation's the problem. So then what we're going to do today is I want you to attempt to create a different form of evaluation. I want you to create a form of evaluation that captures double loop learning, that helps with double loop learning. How is that going to be possible? Well, you're going to need to think creatively. You're going to need to think a lot about your goals, what you want the evaluation to do, and I want you to think a lot about what data you need to collect to help analyze your basic assumptions, to help analyze the parts of your evaluation plan that are that require double loop learning to assess. Okay. So for your CRM, I asked you to align these to create columns for basic information, such as name, address. I suggest you do first name, last name. I suggest you break out address into 2 columns, plus city, county, state. City, state, and zip. And also zip code, emails, at least 1, probably 2, phones, at least 1, probably 2, that sort of thing, and some notes, right? And then I want you to create some sort of a system, maybe a 1 through 5 system. Let's say we're trying to analyze homelessness, okay? With 1 being that the client you have has the most difficulties finding coming into a home, and is the least likely to respond to your efforts. You might call that person the most chronic, 1 through 5, right? And you'd give person A a 1 and person B a 5. Okay, but let's also think about the causes, right? Cause, and then you might create causes and you might have them coded 1 through 5. The code might be drugs and alcohol, divorce, joblessness, etc. So then you could type in drugs, joblessness. Okay. But then what you need to do is think about a third or fourth column where you consider how you can reconsider your assumptions based on that, right? So what you could do is maybe a follow-up column, where you determine what kind of follow-up happened, how good the follow-up was and why. Or maybe you could have an alternative explanations column. Give somebody a space other than notes, which is basic notes. Give them a space where you encourage them to think about the basic assumptions underlying this spreadsheet. Also, in this 1 through 5 and this causes section, you can validate these so that you could limit what sort of causes you could enter. For example, you could say that 3 major causes that you want to track are jobs, divorce, divorce, joblessness, and let's say four major categories, health/mental health, okay, are the 4 reasons. So then you can validate that column. How do you validate? I'm used to, there it is, data validation. So you can validate that particular column so that you can use a list from right here for the entire column. Okay. Save. Central validation range. Okay, so now you can do a drop down, drugs, divorce, health, right? So I hope you saw how to do that. If not, just look up how to validate or validation of a column. That'll help you in either Google Sheets, as I'm using here, or I'm more used to Excel or OpenOffice Calc. All right, the other thing is I need you to and figure out how you would use this in a board meeting or in another staff meeting of some kind, how you would use this data that you're capturing to do double loop learning. I want you to make an adaptive learning argument about how you would use that data and why you chose that data. I hope that wasn't too noisy when I pounded on the desk. I got passionate about double loop learning. And then figure out 5 names, at least 5 names that you can put into this list. If it's a fundraising list, right? So instead of chronic 1 through 5, you could do likelihood to donate and amount. So the likelihood to donate might be 1, right? Which is very likely to donate. And you have to specify which is likely, which is unlikely. And that's a really good, easy way would be to qualify it like that. 1, likely. 2, somewhat likely. All right, does that make sense? And then you could validate this column as 1 through 5, likely, somewhat likely, somewhat unlikely, unlikely. And do not call. You know, that's actually a really important one for fundraisers. Do not contact. So you could make a list of 5 people who might be interested in donating to your nonprofit. Okay, I promise not to use this list in any way, shape, or form. This is your list and your data. If I used it, it would be stealing. Okay, so I'm not going to do that because it would be illegal and I could go to jail. Don't want to do that. But if you make a list and try and fill out as many of these columns as possible, so that you actually have a list. Brainstorm these, really stretch your contacts. Think about if you're doing fundraising, for example, think about who you could actually call to raise money from. And think about how much you would ask for them and why. Think about why you would ask for that amount. And your double loop learning might be something about the why, right? Something about why this amount. And that would help you engage in double loop learning around fundraising. right? In fact, I suggest that most of you, unless you have a very particular reason for doing something else, I suggest most of you try doing funding. Try thinking about donors. It's the easiest way to use CRM, but it's also really valuable. This could be the beginning of your personal list that you take with you wherever you go, right? Use the internet, Google searches, whatever you can, Facebook, to really research the people who you're putting on this list, and really try and find out everything you can about them. And you can use that as your own list. Later, we'll do more practice researching funders, and we'll actually apply that to a real nonprofit who's asked for our help. All right. Next, I want to talk about, first I want to point out a couple of ethical cases that have been in the news lately, in case you think that Greg Mortensen is the only ethical case out there. Me Too has been attacking the nonprofit sector pretty heavily. The Red Cross General Counsel resigned over the weekend because of handling sexual assault and harassment allegations. The CEO, the president of the board in this case, and the CEO, both were women at Red Cross. And so that resignation happened quickly. Much more slowly was the resignation that happened at the Humane Society of New York. I just found this out just a couple of minutes ago at 5:21 today, East Coast time, so 3:21 in Colorado. This guy finally resigned. He refused to resign, the CEO of the Humane Society, after he was accused of sexual assault for a long time, until 7 members of the board, all but one of them were women. The board of directors resigned from the board and saying either he goes or we go. And then at 3:21 today, Mountain Time, he in fact resigned. So these ethics questions that we asked last week are ongoing and continuing. Now, next week, you will have to write up a 1-page to 2-page, this is going to be fairly loose. I just want to know that where your thinking is on the nonprofit manager profile, okay? So 1 to 2 pages on this nonprofit manager, doing research around him. What do I want to know in those 1 to 2 pages? I'm going to want to know, 1, why this nonprofit? Why this person from this nonprofit? It needs to be some sort of executive position, someone who's in the room where it happens, to quote Hamilton, for which I have tickets. In the room where it happens. It needs to be a financial director, executive director, someone higher up who's in the staff, or a board member. And I prefer an executive member of the board, not one of the subsidiaries, but a secretary, treasurer, vice president, or president of the board of a nonprofit. That's who I'm looking at. I want you to talk to someone who's higher up in these nonprofit organizations, okay? So what sort of research do I want you to do? Well, go to guidestar.org. Guidestar.org. I'll put this in the in your class page. Go to guidestar.org and type in the name of the nonprofit that you're looking at. Today we'll look at the Sun Valley Youth Center. I had a very good student who works there and does amazing work. So we'll look at that. It's in Sun Valley, Denver. Sun Valley neighborhood in Denver. So you type in the name of the nonprofit that you're looking for in guidestar.org and then click on it. At this point, you'll have to log in or create yourself a login. The login is free. It's free, but do create yourself a login. GuideStar. It's good to know about GuideStar. You can do a lot of research, including finding out the donors to all your other nonprofits that you can use to raise money. All right. Now now you're looking at them. What I want to know is, first of all, go to their website and find out their basic mission. Their website is usually listed here. Here we go. So see, here's where you have to sign in. So their website is usually listed here. If not, oh, there it is. So go to their website and take a look at their website, look at what they're doing, look at the programs and stories. In particular, see if you can find their mission. We are committed to giving Denver's poorest neighborhood a hope for the future. It's a pretty interesting mission. And they have a lot of stories about how they do that. We're so thankful for all of our families and supporters that made the holidays, blah, blah, blah. So you can look at all those stories. So that's number 1. Number 2, I want you to go to Auraria library page and check out LexisNexis. LexisNexis is a database. No, they're not there. Go to the database list. LexisNexis is a database of news articles. It's pretty detailed. Wow. Did they not subscribe to it anymore? Nexis Uni. They've renamed it. Nexis Uni. So go to Nexis Uni, click on it. It's a pretty detailed list of news articles. Put the name of your nonprofit in quotes in the Nexis Uni database and see if there's any news about them. Find out what they've done, what they haven't done, what's interesting about them. Here they did a golf charity tournament. Seems like a pretty big fundraiser. Looks like that got a lot of news. Whole Family Wellness during Child Abuse Prevention Month was something about them. So go ahead and look that up and see if they've been in the news and for what. The last thing I want you to do is look up their 990, which is available through GuideStar. Yep. The latest 990, there we are. You can download their latest 990 forms from the last couple of 3 years for free. Again, all this is free because this is their tax document that they have to fill out. And you can see all kinds of neat things like how much money they make, what sort of work they do. They have a code where they tell you what work they do. Who's on their board? This is the board of directors. So you can look up the people on their board if you want to, and who is their executive director. Kristen Rollerson, in this case, how much they're paid. Because all this is public document when you work for a nonprofit. And sometimes you can even find out who they got money from. At the end here, you can find out who donated to their nonprofit. And for foundations, you can find out who they donated to. So look through that, see if you get any information that's valid in that. And at the end, you should know very clearly why you want to know more about this nonprofit and this person, this particular manager in this nonprofit. So that's it for this week. Fairly short video. Just wanted to give you that, that overview. And then, of course, the nonprofit manager research is due not this week, but next week. But do be thinking about all of this information and thinking about what nonprofit you're going to try to use. If you don't end up using the nonprofit you research right now, that's fine. You'll just have to do this research again for whatever nonprofit you intend to eventually profile, whatever manager you intend to you eventually profile. All right. Thanks a lot. Enjoy the week. There's a lot of reading this week, but it's fairly easy. You just have to do the quiz and the one fairly simple assignment. All right. Thanks a lot and have a good one.